Hi, I'm Psiman and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be upgrading from my GTX 1070 that I've had in my system for the last 3 years to the RTX 2070 Super. I'm going to start by recapping just a little bit of what I did in the last video and run down very quickly what I've got in my system at the moment. Then I'm going to take out the GTX 1070 card. I've got it in here. We'll take a look at the two cards for comparison. Then I'll put in the 2070 Super and run a few benchmarks and see what kind of boost this gives me for the things that I like doing on my machine. So that's going to be a bit of video rendering. I've got a couple of video programs that I'm going to test just with a very short file to see if there's much difference. Also, I'm going to run the Time Spy benchmark from 3D Mark, and then just a couple of games because they're the only ones I've got benchmarks for. That's Batman Arkham Origins and Deus Ex Mankind Divided. So let's start with that brief rundown of what's currently housed in my Corsair 400Q case, or whatever it's called. I'm not even sure the exact name of the case that I'm using, but it's just a plain old black box. And in there at the moment, just recently upgraded, I've got an MSI Meg 570 Ace motherboard with a Ryzen 5 3600 processor in it. It's got 64 gigabytes of 3200 megahertz Corsair Vengeance RAM and a couple of NVMe drives, an SSD and a 4 terabyte Western Digital drive in there just for media, for dumping media files and things on. So that's the system that I'm running at the moment with the GTX 1070 in it. So I'm going to go and get the graphics card out of that so we can take a look at it. So here it is, the GTX 1070 that has been serving me pretty well for the last 3 years. So let's just move this over here. And yeah, I have to say I've been happy with my purchase. I definitely at the time wanted to go for the GTX 1080 as that was kind of the top of the range. And I kind of wish at times that I had gone for that processor, just purely because it would have allowed me to push my VR games a little bit further, get a slightly better image quality out of them by super sampling the image, or in some games not having frame rate issues that this did encounter, especially once I'd upgraded to the Vive Pro. Things like Fallout 4 were taxed quite heavily by this card. But it has served me well. As I said, £380, I think it was, based on the conversion rate at the time when I bought it in Dubai. Well, that's going to be replaced with this card, which, including delivery straight from NVidia, was £475, which to me doesn't seem that bad if you're comparing it directly to other 2070 Super cards. The cheapest one I could find was either, I think, a Zotac or one of the other brands that I'm not that familiar with for £475, and then they went up from there to around £550 for MSI's gaming trio version, which I kind of considered doing, but then I thought for that extra 75 or so pounds, I'm not going to get that much more performance out of it than I am out of this. So let's take a look at what we get for our money. And here it is. This is the first time I've really looked at it, apart from quickly removing the tape around it. Yeah, I haven't even taken it out of the anti-static bag yet. So let's get it out of this noisy thing. It's more difficult than it looks. There we go. So, it's quite a nice looking bit of kit. I do like the silver finish, and the silver backplate is quite nice as well, and it's got a black I/O port, or O port would it be? It's just output. I don't think there's any input going into there. So as a comparison to what we had before, I think that looks a bit smarter. Not that that's really important, is it? I mean, to be honest with you, looks really an unimportant factor for me, because they're going in this case, and this case has got no, I say they are, this is going in here. It's got no side panel on it. Well, obviously it's got no side panel on it at the moment. I mean, it hasn't got a glass side panel, so we can't see what it looks like. So the fact that it has its GeForce RTX logo, or that it's got this fancy silver backplate, isn't going to make much difference to me. Or that it's got this mirrored reflective part on it, which a lot of people have complained about already in reviews that I've seen, because it's a bit of a fingerprint magnet. And it even comes with another nice piece of protective plastic. So I'm quite sure by the end of this video I'll have got some fingerprints on there, but yeah, I've got to say, from an industrial design standpoint, it's pretty cool. I think it looks better than this. I've never really liked the look of this graphics card, but it looks kind of similar sort of design with the two fans, which I like much more than the noisy blower style cards that the previous generation of GTX cards had. I remember when I went to buy this, I deliberately didn't buy one of those Founders Edition style cards or any of the other ones that looked a bit like them. I waited to get my hands on something with a couple of fans on it. So anyway, enough waffling. I think we've seen enough of the card to know that it's pretty cool. I'm going to stick it in the system now, and let's power her up and find out how good it really is. I've heard that it's going to give similar sort of performance to a GTX 1080 Ti, so that's pretty nice. Well, as you can see, the system is back up and running, so that means the graphics card is working. I ran all of the benchmarks again that I ran with the GTX 1070, so let's get into those results. Now, the first couple of things that I was interested in were two video programs for the editing side of things. The first of those is a stitching program for creating 360 3D videos. That's by Insta360. And so to test the system, to tax it quite heavily, what I decided to do was just create a short 10-second clip of 8 by 8K. So it's a stereoscopic 8K file. And on the GTX 1070, that took 2 minutes and 38 seconds to run. Whereas on the RTX 2070, it was actually slower at 2 minutes 51. And I don't know why. Because this is essentially the same as an RTX 2080. And I remember seeing in a previous release of the software that it had been optimized, or it had been kind of fixed, I guess. So RTX 2080 cards could use it properly. So I'm not quite sure what's happened. Maybe they're going to need to release another fix because there might be something slightly different with this that's causing problems. Maybe it's a driver issue. I don't know, but it certainly shouldn't be slower than this. If anything, if it's only leveraging the CPU, then really they should be the same. So that's the first bit of disappointment. Then another piece of software that I use for editing, especially for the video that you're watching now and any videos I now create on this channel, is DaVinci Resolve 16. So I took that large file, that 8x8K stereoscopic file, and I rendered it out to an MP4 4x4K stereoscopic file, and on this card it was pretty quick. So a 10-second clip rendered out in 23 seconds, whereas with the the RTX 2070 Super, it wasn't actually slower. No, it was a little bit faster at 20 seconds, which is not really what I was hoping for. I was hoping to see at least a 50% improvement in these things, because sometimes I have to render out huge files, and any time you can shave off it is time the computer can be used for other things. So, bit disappointing that Resolve doesn't take advantage in the rendering side of things, but it was just a clip. I know that Resolve will take advantage when it comes to putting a lot of effects and things on videos, things that are GPU enhanced or optimized for GPU rendering. So I haven't tested it yet, but I know it is going to be an improvement in Resolve, but in the area of rendering out the files, it's only slightly faster. So those were just a couple of small tests on software that I use for video editing, but the gaming is probably what you guys are more interested in. Was there a big improvement? Well, yeah, actually, there's a fair improvement in performance, but then you should expect that. This card is 3 years old. This card costs, well, let's say £400. I think this was in the UK when I bought it. Well, I paid around about 380, as I said earlier, when I bought it in Dubai. But I think they were selling for about £400 in the UK at the time, whereas this is 475. So, it's, what, let's 20% more expensive, something like that. I'm not a great mathematician, especially not off the top of my head, but it's more than 20% better in games, thankfully. Although you would hope in 3 years, because this is essentially the replacement for that card, I would have hoped for a bigger jump in performance than what I'm going to tell you about. So the first thing I did with gaming or gaming benchmarks was to run 3D Mark's Time Spy. With the 1070, the whole system got an overall score of 6,231, I believe. Whereas when I put the RTX 2070 Super in there, that jumped up to 9,632. So we're looking at about a, I guess, 55% increase in performance there. And that's not too bad. In fact, if you were just looking at the GPU scores on that benchmark, it was, I think, more than 60% improvement in the scores. So good, but that's just a benchmark. It doesn't necessarily translate into gaming performance. So the first real game that I looked at was Batman Arkham Origins. I know it's not an amazing game, but as I said at the beginning of the video, I don't really have very many games with built-in benchmarks. So running through that benchmark with the 1070, got an average frame rate of 127 frames per second, whereas with the 2070 Super, it went all the way up to an average of 190 frames per second. So a big jump in performance there of, I guess, around about 50%. And when looking at the minimums, because I think that's an important figure to look at to see how low it drops, it only went down to, was about 93 on this card, and I think 133 on this card. So not quite 50% improvement, but still a big jump in performance of minimum frame rate. The second and final game that I looked at was Deus Ex Mankind Divided, and to be honest, using ultra settings on 1440p with the 1070 didn't produce the kind of performance that I would enjoy playing at. I would definitely drop down the graphical fidelity quite a bit. I'd probably still try and keep it at 1440p because I like the sharpness, but I think I would turn off a lot of effects to try and reach 60 frames a second. But I don't really have any experience with this game, so I don't know. I haven't played it. I've had it on my system for a long time, and I really loved the previous Deus Ex game, so I'm a bit surprised that I haven't played it. But yeah, I think it really would have stretched my machine to get it at a playable state that I would enjoy at 1440p, whereas a big jump, a 59% jump of both average and minimum frame rates when going up to the RTX 2070. In fact, the minimum frame rate on this, which I think was around 50 something frames, 55 frames per second, was more than the maximum frame rate produced by this card. So I might have to do a tiny little bit of tweaking. I probably wouldn't play it at all ultra settings, but I'd feel quite confident that I could enjoy playing that game using this card. So that is the limit of the testing so far. Well, it's only been in there for a short while, and I'll do more gaming over the next few days, few weeks, and when I come around to doing a vlog, I'll update you guys and let you know if it is a truly worthwhile, well, it's not a worthwhile effort, but that it's worth the money to go from this to this, or whether I should have just stuck with that card all along and waited for something better to come along, which is always the fear with any type of technology. It goes out of date so quickly. In fact, AMD seem to be producing some good cards at the moment. These new Navi cards at about £380, I think it was, for the 5700 XT is not that far behind this in performance. The only reason that I was turned off to choosing AMD was, firstly, there are some bugs regarding H.264 encoding, and I don't know if they've been solved yet or whether they will. And also the ones that are available at the moment only have the blower style coolers. They get very hot and very noisy. So I chose to pay a bit more money and go for an NVidia card, and hopefully that was the right choice. Although I don't think it will be long before AMD start challenging NVIDIA at the sort of the top of the stack with their something to compete with the 2080 Super and the 2080 Ti. Will it come this year? I don't know, but there is a bit of a buzz on websites and other videos that I've watched saying that maybe not the RDNA architecture that's released this year, but the next version of it, RDNA 2, which I'm guessing is going to come next year, will really compete and outperform what NVIDIA has at the moment. So things are getting exciting in the graphics card space. I've got a feeling this isn't going to last me as long as the 3 years that lasted me. But one area I'm really interested in trying this with is virtual reality. And I've got some new virtual reality toys to talk about in an upcoming video that just arrived today at the same time as this. And I'll get to testing that very soon. So thank you very much for watching from my games room to wherever you are. This is Psiman signing off. Bye-bye.